they keep moving this puppy around. They played like five. Owens. They played him like five positions.
You mean you're not impressed by his 0 for 17?
Well, I
He's
give him
kind of
that.
like Willie Mays.
I give him
0
that.
for his first 20.
So he's got no power right now, but he can play everywhere. I want another journeyman that I bet he makes his own clothes and he's nice to his mother.
Do you know who I think maybe? That is important stuff. The Bradley Zimmer.
Yeah.
Watch RBI yesterday off a tough left-hander. A lot of speed. So who knows? Maybe that's a redemption story.
Zimmer's pretty good, but I'm not sure he is. But we'll see. Okay. Everybody got quiet. All right. Good to be here. Thank you, and thanks for joining us, and thank all of you for being here. I appreciate it. It's so great to be out and among people again, and to do. I was talking to the media people who, like so many people behind me, and so many people like Mr. Heath, the police officers, and so many people at grocery stores are essential workers, and have exposed themselves potentially to the virus. The media people as essential workers, and nobody thinks much about that, and we should all the time be talking about essential workers and what they've done. I spoke to a grocery store worker in Southwest Ohio who said they call me essential worker, but I feel expendable because they don't pay me much and they don't protect me at work. So it's important as we go forward and more people get vaccinated, and some don't go to Florida so they don't have to wear a mask when they get back. Otherwise, my friend Paul would have her mask off, I assume. But how important it is to remember dignity of work and those essential workers as we move forward. I'm joined today by Mayor Kapsakevich, by Alexia Sims, a local business owner and Junction Coalition board member, and Alexa Smith with Freshwater Future, and others. And the three of them will talk, and then any of us, you can direct questions certainly to any of us. These leaders understand how outdated our infrastructure, how outdated infrastructure like we have in this state, how it holds back local economies around Ohio. They see the opportunities we can unleash if done right when we make the bold investment we need. 4 years ago, we were going to pass $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan. Instead, the president and the Congress decided to take that money and give a big tax cut to corporations where 70% of the money went to the 1% richest people in this country. That is simply not going to happen again. This is a time when we need to invest in infrastructure. Our parents, our grandparents left us with infrastructure that was the envy of the world, and we have simply failed to maintain it as a nation. We know countries like China spend billions each year in infrastructure. The U.S., again, used to be number one. Instead, government's chosen to give tax cuts to the rich instead of investing in infrastructure. We're now 13th in the world in the overall quality of our infrastructure. It's more than just roads and bridges. It's childcare, it's housing, it's broadband, it's water quality, it's research and development. It's everything that builds a strong foundation for our economic growth. And water systems are a critical part of that. Across Ohio, communities like Toledo struggle to afford expensive, vital renovations in outdated water and sewer systems and to remove lead pipes. In Toledo, it's more evident because we talk so much about Lake Erie and the importance with what happens with algae blooms and what happens every July or August in this community. But the day-to-day making sure that pipes are lead-free, that water quality is good in rich neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods, and that we do our jobs. These projects can cost billions. The mayor and others estimate it'll cost $60 million alone to replace all of its city-owned lead water lines. It doesn't even include the privately owned pipes. The city estimates as many as 3,000 private water lines have lead in them. Toledo knows all too well, of course, too, when water systems go without updates and repairs, we get water contamination like we've seen in our Great Lake. The Junction Coalition and the City of Toledo are doing important work on water affordability and lead line replacement, but communities and ratepayers shouldn't have to pay for these fixes alone. It's simply impossible for Toledo and for Lucas County and for Fulton County and for Wood County and for Ottawa County and for Williams County, particularly the counties that border on Lake Erie, it's impossible for them to do everything they need to do with local resources. It's a national problem. It's an opportunity that the House, the Senate, President Biden need to seize. We put Ohioans to work, making these repairs, doing this lead abatement, we bring down people's utility bills, we give parents peace of mind, most importantly, that their children's drinking water isn't contaminated. And when we upgrade our infrastructure, it means we compete with China and any other country that's trying to take the economic leadership of the world away from us. Toledo leaders understand that. I'll turn them over to talk about what this investment would mean for Northwest Ohio. Alexia, you first. So, go for it.
Hello, everyone. I'm a child care owner. That's my business that Senator Brown was speaking about, and it's a direct impact on the community that I serve. Right now, our plan that we have, let me say where I'm from. I'm from Toledo Water Council, and I'm also a board member on the Junction Coalition. And just a conversation we've been had, our voices have actually been heard by the city of Toledo. We actually have came together, put together a water task affordability committee, and we're truly working on the problem. But knowing that right now what we have in place is 60 years before all of our lead pipes will be replaced. How many children's life will we touch with that? How many children will be impacted by the lead in the pipes? We can't even foresee what it'll happen. Right now we know that the lead in the pipes hasn't been a significant effect, but we also know that lead, when it comes to affecting children and how they process in school and their development, the numbers are unforeseen. So with the task, with the Toledo Council, we've been talking, we've all came together. Now we have the water affordability task, and our constant conversation is, for one, we just released our debt forgiveness program, but it's making that affordability. I don't know anybody who can come up with $2,000 to make sure that they pay their side of the lead replacement. Nobody just has that sitting around, especially these last 16 to 18 months we've had in the community, period. Like, no one has that money. So we're definitely supporting Senator Brown on making sure that this goes through as much as we can. We now have elected.
Ms. Sims, Ms. Smith.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our community leaders, our local and state federal leaders, for pushing policy that is truly in the interest of protecting access to water and protecting the people consuming that water. Investing in not just infrastructure, but equitable processes, such as water affordability studies and plans, ensures that people like Miss Green Bay aren't paying thousands of dollars in water rates for water running through lead pipes and fixtures, or that another community member has to live 2 years without their water because of a leaking pipe on the public side. Investing in water protection also means that residents of this city are heard. Freshwater Future has been delighted to uplift the back that community voice. No more decisions for us without us. These residents who spoke before you today are not being paid to advocate and do this work. They are out here for their families, so that their lives and their livelihoods aren't threatened. Water is a precious, finite resource, and if we need to take responsibility and prioritize it and ensure its safety. Thank you.
First, I want to recognize some officials who are not only here but are important to the progress that has been made. The councilwoman who represents this part of Toledo is with us, Denise Williams. She's dressed for the occasion today because her occasion is taking her kids, her class, on a field trip. Yes. So, one of our city parks. In one of our city parks. So she's ready to go. I want to recognize Patika Bannister and Doug Stevens, Abby Arnold, who do a lot of work on the utility side of the operations in Toledo. I also want to recognize, and Cindy I'm sorry, I didn't see Cindy Geronimo as well. I especially want to recognize Paula Hicksetson, our state representative. As mayor, she was out front early on learning about what happened in Flint. I can remember at least one, if not more than one, trips she made up to Flint with Marcy Captor to learn about what went wrong there and to help Toledo better prepare itself to avoid the catastrophe that the citizens of Flint faced. We in Toledo, unfortunately, have a double problem. Not only do we have too many old lead lines that need to be replaced, like just about every older city in the country, those pipes guide water coming from a polluted source on its way to our faucets. So we're drawing water from a toxically polluted source in the Western Lake Erie Basin, and then even after it's treated with all of the bells and whistles that we can afford at the Collins Park Water Plant, in too many cases it passes through lines that are lead-based and present many of the challenges the citizens of Flint face. So the senator is right. He went through some of the numbers, but I want to talk about them in terms of the infrastructure that we have in place. Great thanks to Paula Hicks-Hudson. And it allows us to sort of be shovel-ready, as it were, to be able to take whatever resources the federal government can provide to us, whether it's through the infrastructure bill or through another mechanism, to ease the burden on folks in this neighborhood and so many other neighborhoods in Toledo. So yes, you've heard, and it's true. We have a plan that will spend about $60 million over 30 years to replace all our lead lines. That's wonderful, but that's 30 years. You know, so yeah, great. You bet we'll be done in 2051, but 30 years is, it's better than nothing, and at least we have a plan and we have the funding identified. But there's a lot of damage that can be done in 30 years. And if we can accelerate through resources the ability to shrink that timeline, so instead of doing $2 million a year for 30 years, maybe we can do $4 million over, you know, half the time. Whatever the case, $4 million over 15 years. These are resources that the ratepayers of our region support, and they're happy to do it, and we're happy to create the structure for them. But it would be helpful if there were resources that, instead of being directed toward a, you know, tax break for someone who golfs at Mar-a-Lago, could be dedicated to someone living in this neighborhood with the goal of drinking water that is clean and healthy. That plan, we're pretty sure, will replace about 800 lead lines a year. Not bad. Again, not bad, but not the entire size of the problem. Even after we replace these lines, that's just the public infrastructure, don't forget. There are still the private portion of the line from the city connection up to your home, and as was mentioned, we think there's about 3,000 of those that would need to be addressed as well. And yes, it's the responsibility of the citizen, but as was just mentioned, I don't know too many people can reach into their pockets for the $2,000 that we would offer, that would require to fix them. That's why we've set aside about $300,000 a year, every year, for zero interest loans to help these citizens replace their private lines. That's great, but again, and if you're picking up on a theme here, this is probably the 5th time I've said it, that's great, it's better than nothing, but it doesn't solve the whole problem, and for too many people, it doesn't solve the problem quickly enough. So we've identified the problem. We have, I think, programs in place, the zero interest loan, the 30-year plan, initiative after, I think, you know, we have a structure in place. And again, a lot of that is due to how quickly Mayor Hicks-Hudson identified the problem and went and learned about it and put a plan in place that will allow our community to succeed. That's great. Let's reduce that timeline. Let's expand the size of those zero interest grants. We can do all those things with a more sympathetic federal government, one that is focused more on justice than previous federal governments have been. So we're excited to have Senator Brown here, and we know he's our advocate in Washington, and we hope that he can take the word back and advocate on behalf of not just Toledo, but all the communities in Ohio that suffer from this particular challenge. So thank you, Senator.
Questions? Thanks, Mayor. Questions for any of the four of us, or Councilwoman, or Paula, or anybody?
Senator, I'll start with you, I guess. You hear the mayor talking about speeding up the timeline and trying to have more resources. And Toledo's not the only city with this problem. It can be all over Ohio, all over the country. Is there enough federal dollars? Is there enough will to literally speed up that process that he was just talking about?
First question, is there enough federal dollars? The answer is yes. The second question, is there the will to do it, is still not clear. We are in the process of trying to work with Republicans to pass an infrastructure bill. The problem is their proposal is too small. It won't do nearly what the mayor and the council needs, number one. Number two, they've had no way to pay for their bill other than to take money from the child tax credit and some other things which I think should be off limits. We want to pay for our bill by raising the corporate tax. The corporate tax went from 35 to 21% 4 years ago. We want to raise it back up a little bit higher than, not to 35, but higher than 21. And the personal income tax, where millionaires and billionaires got big tax cuts 4 years ago, we want to take away some of those tax cuts. Not for anybody making less than $400,000. So we will go ahead with our plan, and we will get 50 votes if Republicans won't come to the table and do this bipartisanly. It's not up to Mitch McConnell or to me, frankly, to decide what's partisan. It's up to what the voters want. When we passed the American Recovery Plan, almost 60% of Trump working class voters were for it. No Republicans voted for it, but again, it doesn't matter. The public doesn't care if we think it's partisan or bipartisan. They care if we need it, and it's clear we need to do this. And it's not just big cities like Toledo. It's cities like where I grew up in Mansfield and Lima I'm going to later today. Those cities have infrastructure that is decayed just like every industrial city and small town in America. And so we have an obligation. And yeah, I mean, the way the mayor said, I love the way the mayor and what former Mayor Hicks Hudson did and talked about it, that yeah, we can do this over the next 25 years, but how many kids in the Sims daycare centers will drink that water and you know what lead does to the human brain, to small children and babies. It affects their development, and they will never catch up if we don't do this now. And that's why this bill has an urgency and immediacy that we're going to pass in the next 60 days. I hope it's big enough. I hope it's bipartisan, but I want that money passed, and I want it to get to communities like Toledo and Fenley and Mansfield and Cleveland and Flint.
Is there a concern that an investment of this many federal dollars is going to affect individual consumers by exacerbating inflation trends, like for the cost of everyday goods like diapers or bread?
People I talk to, economists I talk to, the conservative Republican talking point is yes, it's going to cause inflation. But I listen to the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, appointed by President Trump. I listened to the former chair of the Federal Reserve, now Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, appointed by Obama. I listened to Ben Bernanke, chair of the Federal Reserve, appointed by Bush. They don't think inflation is a major problem. Inflation now is well under 2%. There are some things I'm concerned. I'm concerned about gas prices. I'm concerned about home prices. But that's not a concern about long-term inflation. And we know how to manage this. And all but the most ideological economists, the people that really care about the country and don't just care about political gain, they don't worry about inflation anytime soon. And if 3 years, 5 years from now it becomes a concern, we address it. But these problems are immediate, the needs we have in our communities. They're immediate for lead, they're immediate for the child tax credit, they're immediate for schools, they're immediate for child care. I mean, one of the reasons that people aren't going back to work in the numbers they want is there are not enough child care facilities. And so most of the people who left the workforce are women, not that men can't take care of children too, but most people who left the workforce are women that aren't coming back. They're not paid high enough in wages, and they don't have child care. It's not that we're paying unemployment benefits. That's not what keeps people out of work.
Question, Senator. Obviously, this group here is all in favor of fixing lead lines. When you have that conversation in Washington, something simple like lead lines, what is the pushback? Where do you find the people that are saying, I just don't think we can pay for lead lines?
Well, they're saying it's too expensive. They're saying let local communities solve it. But local communities can't. I mean, just like local communities didn't build the interstate system, local communities didn't build Plumbrook in the space program. Local communities can't clean up Lake Erie. It's got to be done by society. We all benefit. But as somebody said, when we all do better, we all do better. And that's really the way to look at this. Is that it? Oh, yeah.
Senator Brown, just on a climate change related question. So the issue of water incentives right now that are being established at the state level regarding making, addressing the algal bloom, the phosphorus, and the nitrogen on the western bank. Is there any funding in this American Rescue Plan that you're talking about to help address that? Because we know that that is part of the pathway of why we're in some related ways addressing this issue because of the pollution that we're getting from the runoff.
Well, you start with a huge number of members of the legislature and Republican members of Congress don't accept the science of climate. They're climate deniers, so they don't think there's a role. They're dead wrong. I don't know any reasonable, rational people that don't think that climate change is real. I just did a hearing last week. I'm chair of the Banking Housing Committee, and we did a hearing with the CEOs of the nation's 6 largest banks, people that aren't used to being questioned about their judgment very often, you might guess, and pushed them on climate, that they have a role in figuring risk in the loans they make. So it's the legislature's responsibility, it's Congress's, it's all of us. But it affects, what's happening with climate affects weather patterns, it affects what's happening with the Great Lakes. It's not a surprise that when was the most recent really bad algae bloom was 14 or 13?
14.
It's not a coincidence that how serious it was that year, and it's been not quite to that level, but it's been year after year after year, and the threats that we don't have a legislature and a Congress, frankly, or a president until now that wants to deal with it. But I think we'll see pretty bold action, and that's all part of this plan.
So the algal bloom is going to pop up July and August. What do you suggest that we all do, citizens and folks like yourselves, to help push that issue to address it so that we can start to remediate that?
Mayor, you want to answer that? You want me to?
Well, no, I will.
Okay, I will too. But
No, the reality is that if someone turned off the spigot today, the phosphorus spigot, the nutrient runoff that's causing this, and everyone knows it's somewhere between 90 and 92% comes from the agricultural runoff. If somehow it all stopped today, we would probably still be dealing with algal blooms for the next 15 years. They think there's already just enough. There's that much already in there. So there are things that we can do at the municipal level. We have just about every bell and whistle you could imagine at that Collins Park plant, which is why we're able to take water from that source, and by the time it makes it to your faucet, it's drinkable. It's actually among the highest quality water in the country, if you can believe it. Now, the outrage is that we have had to pay so much in rates to do what the legislature and in previous administrations, the EPA wouldn't do for us. We have had to spend, and I'm not kidding, $1 billion over 20 years on both of our water plants to make sure that water is drinkable. We've done our part. What we need is some help from Columbus, and it's not. And when I talk about help, it's not from the party that's in the minority. It's from the governor of the legislature. Here's the last thing I will turn over. This turned into a town hall. I don't know whether or not. The governor talks about H2 Ohio. Okay, that's I don't even know. It's well intentioned, but all the voluntary incentives in the world will not solve this problem. You talk about carrot and stick, all they ever do is carrot. There's never a stick. And so it was August of 2014 that we had the water crisis. Between Kasich and now with H2 Ohio, DeWine, the state has spent $3 billion, with a B, $3 billion, and that has nothing to do with the $1 billion that we have taxed ourselves to make those improvements. And actually, not only has the water not gotten better, it's gotten worse, because all the incentives of the world without accountability won't solve the problem. So we need fighters like Paula in the legislature, and that's my handoff.
Thank you. And if I can, because it's one of the reasons why I went to Columbus is because you can't do it at the local level. You've got to have a partnership between the local, state, and the federal government. But really, how we deal with this issue is that, and I'm not off topic, but I'm going to say this, we have to vote. We have to engage the legislature. We've got to send letters and everything else to, not only to the friends down there, but to the people who don't want to hear us. because by us staying here locally and talking amongst ourselves, we continue to spend the billions of dollars at the local level. Just this past year, when we're doing the budget, members of the governor's own party worked to cut H2 Ohio. They work to cut it because they don't believe that it's the right way to go. They believe in the voluntary way of doing it without, I was just in a committee hearing last week where they're beating up on the Ohio EPA director because they feel she has too many regulations that's going to make it hard for people, farmers, other folks that are the ones that are detrimental to our environment to continue on. So that's why, while we're talking, which is so important, we talk about and Senator Brown needs our support. He needs us not just to be here for press conferences, but for us to send him letters, to send him information so that he can go and continue to say, I heard from the people in my district. I heard from the people from the state of Ohio. The mayor needs to also hear from everyone here because as the task force has worked, they've heard the voices and now there's a plan going forward. That's what we must do. We can't sit here and be idle. We can't sit here and just have these nice opportunities. We've got work to do because we're talking about the Cuyahoga River, whatever it's called, on fire. That Ohio was the leading agent for clean water, and now we're becoming the state that is ashamed. We should be ashamed of ourselves.
We put in back right after Biden's election, we added $500 million to the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which is for all the Great Lakes. And I mean, the Secretary of Agriculture now is Secretary Vilsack, and he has been on this lake. He's looked at Lake Erie. He was the 8 years with Obama too. He's back as Secretary of Agriculture, and I talk to him about this all the time about what's happening in Lake Erie. His predecessor, Secretary Perdue, who was a Georgia farmer, I'm not sure he knew where the Great Lakes was, or is, or were. The Great Lakes were, the Great Lakes, whatever.
Whatever.
So,
He doesn't know how to get
but
there.
he didn't, I mean, talking to him about algae blooms, talking about phosphorus runoff, talking about rules. It was all deregulation, letting farmers and businesses do whatever they wanted to do, and there should be no EPA rules, and that's really one of the differences between all of us and them in that way. Any more questions? Is that it?
Senator, I do have a question. I know that in Toledo we have had artificial intelligence and Freshwater Futures working in that space. What are we doing to ensure that frontline communities have the information for their children? Will that be part of this bill? Not just the infrastructure, but also the education. Will that also be part of the bill moving forward?
Information,
Information around the cognitive disabilities of children. In regards to job and workforce development for community members who are in BIPOC communities, making sure that they have jobs as part of this bill. Will there be an equitable percentage?
yeah, I mean, it's the debate has been, I mean, conservatives have said, okay, we're for some infrastructure, but that's water, sewer, bridges, highways. The rest of us have said infrastructure is also child tax credit. It's also help for, it's how investment in housing, expanding the voucher program, Section 8. It's doing more public housing. It's what you do with schools. It's helping to roll back student debt in some cases. But it's all of that. And the answer is yes. I mean, if we do the right kind of infrastructure, the Infrastructure Jobs Act that President Biden's suggesting, and the American Families Bill, it's going to mean more investment in the things that gives kids a chance. I mean, to me, it's all about, infrastructure is all about launching the next generation of children, and that's everything from investment in taking lead out of pipes to child tax credit to what you do with health care and what you do with housing and what you do with Head Start and what you do with all of that.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good work. Good to see you. Thanks. Well done. Well done. That's a cool one.
So this So when you touched it, it made my audio go flat.
Because I was playing with it, that's what made it. Give me that again. I want to do that again.
Yeah,
So that's what made it.
Store it right in there.
So if I just go like this, that makes it.
Can we ask you a couple questions when we get a chance?
Sure. If I can stick in my mouth.
I got a quick question for Vinny. So,